So far, we've talked about tangible assets such as property, plant, and equipment. Those assets had physical substance, and we could identify that they were used for business purposes. Intangible assets are slightly different. They are still being used for business purposes, however, they are intangible in terms of that they lack physical substance. In most cases, intangible assets are a protection of the rights and privileges of the owner of the intangible asset so that they are protected from any type of competition or the protection of their rights when it comes to the ownership of a certain piece of property. Intangible assets can include patents, copyrights, franchises or licenses, trademarks, trade names, and even goodwill. When we account for intangible assets, remember that some intangible assets will have a limited life, while other intangible assets we cannot determine the life, and so therefore we will keep the intangible asset on our balance sheet, but we will not spread the cost over the life of the asset since we do not know how long that life will actually be. If we do know the length of the life of the asset, we will amortize the cost of the asset over the life of the asset. The term amortization is just like depreciation, however, we spread the cost over the useful life of an intangible asset. We still use a contra asset account, but instead of calling it accumulated depreciation, we call it accumulated amortization. The first intangible asset is a patent. A patent is the exclusive right to manufacture, sell, or control the invention for a period of 20 years from the date of the granting of the patent. The reason why we look at having patents is because companies have spent so much time and resources to develop products or even concepts that we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to recover those costs. So, what we want to make sure is that they're protected from competition or from someone else copying their product for a period of time so they can recover those costs. Because we know that the patent will last for 20 years, we can take the cost in the creation and enforcement of the patent and spread the cost as amortization over the remaining life of the patent. We would expense the amortization on the income statement and record accumulated amortization. Now, what do you do with the cost of the development of the product called research and development? Research and development of a product is not part of the patent and is expensed on the income statement in the period incurred. Once the product has been developed in its final stage, or the concept has been developed to a point that the patent can be filed with the government, the legal fees and all the costs related to the development and the acquisition of the patent will be capitalized and put on the balance sheet and then spread amongst the periods in which we have benefit. Also, in the case of a situation where a company needs to enforce its patent, those legal fees are not expensed, but rather added to the cost of the patent and amortized over the remaining useful life of the patent. So here's an illustration. National Labs purchases a patent at the cost of $60,000 on June 30th. National estimates the useful life of the patent to be 8 years. Prepare the journal entry to record the amortization for the 6-month period ended December 31st. When we do amortization, we use the straight line method for amortization. So, we take the $60,000 for the cost of acquiring the patent, divided by the 8 years that the patent will last. We get an annual amortization of $7,500. Remember, just like depreciation, we can only take amortization for the period of time that we own the patent. So we take 6/12 and we get an amortization for the 6-month period of $3,750. We debit amortization expense for $3,750 and credit the patent for $3,750. An alternative to the credit entry could have been a credit to accumulated amortization patent for the same dollar amount. Notice that we use the useful life of 8 years. On the prior slide, we said that the life of a patent is 20 years. That shows you that when you acquire a patent, you own the patent, but you have the right to sell the patent to another party. If you are the buyer of a patent that has already existed, you amortize the cost of your acquisition of that patent for the remaining life of the patent. Research and development costs for patents, copyrights, new processes and products are expensed in the period incurred. We do not capitalize R&D costs because a lot of times we don't know if all that research and development comes into a marketable product. So therefore R&D is expensed and we only capitalize the cost of the acquisition of the protection. Our next intangible asset are copyrights. Copyrights are protections given to the owner of an artistic or published work so that they can reproduce and sell that work in order to recover their efforts in creating the work. A copyright is granted for the life of the creator plus 70 years. So think about items that are copyrighted in your lives today. Do you purchase music online? That music online is protected by copyright. When you purchase access to music, you are not buying the music itself. Rather, you are provided a license to use that music. The music itself belongs to the artist. So, for instance, take a look at recently Michael Jackson and his ownership of the copyright to the musics within the Beatles library. During the period of time that Michael Jackson was alive, he purchased those rights from the record company that produced and owned the rights to the Beatles. Whenever you hear music on the radio from the Beatles, the radio stations are required to pay a royalty to whoever owns the copyright. If you were to share your favorite Beatles library with your friends, you would be in violation of the copyright of the songs. The only way that you would not be in violation of the copyright is if you had paid a royalty to the owners of the copyright. As the owner of a copyright, similar to a patent, if you had to defend your copyright, you would not expense the legal fees associated with that defense. You would have to capitalize the legal fees, and then you would amortize the legal fees that incurred to defend the copyright over the life of the copyright. If the creator is still alive, we do not know what the end of the copyright period is, so therefore we would have to keep those capitalized costs on the balance sheet until we know what the end of the copyright period is. Another intangible asset are trademarks and trade names. They can be a word, phrase, jingle, symbol, or even a concept that identifies a particular company or product. So when you see terms like McDonald's, or you see a game like Monopoly, or you see a car company such as Ford, all of those names are covered by trademarks. The length of time that a trademark or a trade name exists is 20 years. However, you can renew that trademark, and there's no limitation on how long you renew that trademark. So a company like Coca-Cola has renewed their trademark many times since the establishment of the Coca-Cola bottling company. Now, here's an example of something that could be very creative in the creation of a trademark. Some of you may have recalled the Los Angeles Lakers when they were in their heyday in the 1980s. During the time of Magic Johnson, the Lakers were winning and they won 2 world championships with the National Basketball Association. During the parade and the ceremony in front of Staples Center, Pat Riley, the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, told the audience that he guaranteed that the Los Angeles Lakers would win the 3rd world championship, and he used the phrase three-peat. Several months later, after he had made the use of the word three-peat, and he saw that sportscasters around the world were using the term three-peat, he went and trademarked the term three-peat. At which time he had the protection of using that term. If anyone else used that term, they would be in violation of the trademark. Organizations like ESPN could use the trademark if they were willing to pay a royalty to Pat Riley. The ownership of a trademark can be sold from company to company. The cost to acquire that trademark is capitalized and left on the balance sheet, and there is no amortization taken because we do not know the exact end of the trademark period. Another type of intangible asset are franchises. You may have seen franchises like Subway Sandwich or McDonald's or even Toyota in a car dealership in which they have purchased a right to use the name Toyota. So in other words, a franchise is a contractual agreement between the franchisor and a franchisee. The franchisor is the corporation who created the franchise, and the franchisee is the purchaser of the right to use the name and the concept of the franchisor. Why do people use franchises? If you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about starting a business, it is far easier to start a business that has already been established with key suppliers and a product that is recognizable from the consumer. So in order to do that, you may want to get a head start by buying the rights to use someone else's name. So a profitable restaurant such as McDonald's will be very expensive for someone to buy a franchise from because they know they have a proven market. Fast food stores such as In-N-Out Burger have decided not to franchise their concept because they would rather own all the stores in-house and not sell the rights to people due to wanting to keep the quality of the product and maintaining the strict guidelines in terms of how their stores are being maintained. So franchises are limited to a contract that says how long that contract is good for. Since there is a definite time to most franchises, the franchise fee can be capitalized and be expensed as amortization over the life of the franchise. If the franchise does not have a definite life, we capitalize the asset and we on the balance sheet, and we do not amortize the cost. The next is goodwill. And many times people want to buy a company and are willing to pay more than the company is worth. The excess of what you pay for a company to its fair market value is considered goodwill. Now, goodwill is very important for many companies because that's the premium that a company is being sold for because it has established customers, a customer list, a following, suppliers, various things that make the company successful. So a buyer buying into that company would be willing to pay more for it because of all the various items that have made it a successful company. Because goodwill is an ongoing asset, and essentially we don't know when goodwill will go away, we will capitalize the cost of the acquisition goodwill on the balance sheet and not amortize goodwill. However, we should periodically look at goodwill to determine if goodwill has been impaired. What we mean by the term impairment of goodwill is if something has happened that now the company is not worth that much more than what the company's cost us to purchase. If that was the case, we would have to make a permanent adjusting journal entry to reduce the amount of goodwill and then expense the impairment on our income statement. So here's an example of how we would present long-lived assets on our balance sheet. On a prior recording, we talked about property, plant, and equipment. Property, plant, and equipment, we show the cost less the accumulated depreciation to give us the book value of property, plant, and equipment. And we can show intangible assets as cost less accumulated amortization, or we can show intangible assets as cost net of accumulated depreciation. In the example that you see on the screen right now, we are showing it at cost net of amortization.